coronavirus pandemic swept almost the entire territory of planet Earth in 2020. COVID-19 divided the human life literally to before and after. What's happening now in different countries of the world? Did we manage to adapt to the new reality? What's the world like during quarantine? All this in the program Stop COVID. With the arrival of fall season and lower temperatures, most countries unfortunately have to admit that the pandemic is gaining momentum. Turkey is no exception. If in the summer the increase was about 1,000 cases per day, then from the end of October there are over 2,000 new cases. In total, about 370,000 infections of COVID-19 have been confirmed in the country. Of this, more than 317,000 patients recovered. I'm standing at Joly Square in the heart of Ankara. Usually there are a lot of people here. All public transport and subway lines pass through here. Therefore, people who want to go to the other parts of the city in one way or another will find themselves in this square. However, the pandemic made serious adjustments to the daily life of the residents of the Turkish capital. Now the number of users of public transport and the number of people walking decreased significantly. A deadly epidemic hit Turkey on March 10th. Only 5 days later, the first sick person died. Health Minister Fahrettin Khodzha announced the spread of the virus nationwide on April 1st. The COVID-19 epidemic fundamentally changed the way the social, economic, political, legal, military, religious, and cultural spheres of Turkey operate. Officially, the country didn't introduce quarantine, but the precautions taken were not inferior to the quarantine ones. For example, institutions of secondary and higher education have switched to a distance learning system since March. Just a few days ago, school children from grades 8 to 12 who are taking state exams returned to traditional classes for 2 days a week. Effective April 11, a nationwide weekend curfew was imposed. This process lasted until June. Also, adults over 65 and young people under 20 were prohibited from going outside. For about 3 months, people from these groups were allowed to go outside only for a few hours a week. I didn't leave house for several months. Once you learn that this epidemic is dangerous, you yourself cannot go anywhere. Of course, it wasn't easy. In my life, I don't remember that I didn't come to work for several months. This period showed us all that every moment is important in life. On June 1st, the country began the first period of relaxation of precautions. Domestic tourism resumed, cafes and restaurants reopened. Foreign tourists were able to start visiting the Mediterranean coast only in July. As a result, the tourism industry fell by 80%. Typically, tourism accounted for $35 billion in revenue per year. The coronavirus also damaged other economic areas in Turkey. The government exempted such enterprises from paying part of taxes and granted a deferral for loans, amended the work schedule in the public and private sectors, and prohibited layoffs for up to 1 year. Despite these efforts, many businesses have closed in 8 months. My store was closed for 3 months. I didn't receive the help offered by the government. In 90 days, I spent the money I saved up to this day. I cannot say that the work is going well now, but I moved on to the development of online trading. We have to do at least something. In Turkey, if you leave home, you must wear a mask. It should completely cover the nose and mouth. Severe measures will be taken against violators. The fine is about $150. The population has already formed social responsibility, and if you are seen without a mask in a public space, one of the citizens can reprimand you. Home quarantine violators are also subject to a fine about $400. In some regions of the country, those who do not comply with self-isolation measures are even placed in special hostels. As part of the anti-coronavirus campaign, the authorities of the Sakarya province urged violators not only to stay at home but also to start reading books. In accordance with the latest decision, those who must remain in quarantine wear a special bracelet. In Turkey, as in many other countries, several groups of scientists are working on creating a vaccine against a new type of coronavirus. So far, only one of them has reached the level of conducting tests on humans. The authorities fear an even greater increase amid the season flu. Nevertheless, the Turkish government assures that the situation in the resort regions is stable. There are a lot of vacationers in Akdeniz on the coast of Aegean and Marmara Seas. Over the past 3 months, more than 3 million tourists from abroad have visited the resorts of Antalya. Of course, the figures are very low compared to previous years. However, during a pandemic, these figures can be considered as a great achievement. Local authorities say this was made possible thanks to the Safe Tourism program. In general, a number of changes have been made at Turkish resorts this year.
Қонақ үйлердің тек 50% бөлмелері ғана жұмыс жасауы тиіс. Хауыз және теңіз жағалауындағы орындар арақашықтықты сақтауы қажет.
Hotel occupancy rate is 50%. Distance must be maintained at the pool and on the beach. It should be noted that in accordance with the new rules, to the usual hotel rooms, standard, suite, deluxe, and royal, one more option has been added: isolation room. Tourists who develop symptoms of the coronavirus are immediately placed there and receive first aid. 24-hour service is available in an isolated room. Here, doctors and nurses work in shifts. In Turkish resorts, the all-inclusive system remains all-inclusive, but the buffet in restaurants is not the same as before. The rules have been changed to maintain distance. Before that, vacationers stood in line and took food on their own. Under the new rule, a customer can order food through a waiter.
Жаңа ережеге сәйкес тұтынушы қалаған тамағын даяшы арқылы алады.
The most critical coronavirus situation is now in Istanbul. According to official figures, it accounts for 40% of all cases of infection in the country. The Turkish Ministry of Health is proposing to introduce alternating work shifts in factories, thereby reducing the need for people to use public transport and leave their homes. Spain has experienced all the horrors of coronavirus pandemic. The first wave hit this country especially hard. In the spring of 2020, the growth in the number of deaths in the metropolitan areas of Spain broke all records. But even in small provinces, life turned upside down with the outbreak of the pandemic.
Я живу в маленьком городе Кадис, это на самом юге Испании. У нас карантин.
I live in the small town of Cadiz in the very south of Spain. Our quarantine began very unexpectedly. At first, we heard the news from Madrid and Barcelona, and then one day they reported that in 3 days the quarantine begins here. And not just a quarantine, but a lockdown. So you could only leave the house for shopping, to the pharmacy, or to the hospital if you really need it. The quarantine was strict. You could leave the house, in my opinion, no further than 500 meters from the place where you lived. This could be checked, and I know of cases when the police stopped a person on the street and checked his registration, how far he went from home.
Случай, когда полиция останавливала человека на улице и проверяла его прописку, далеко ли он ушел от дома.
In mid-May, the lockdown was lifted in Spain, but of course quarantine measures remained. For example, wearing masks is still mandatory for all residents over 6 years old, both indoors and on the street. The fine of violation is relatively small, 100 euros. However, if you resist the demand of the police to put on a means of protection, the size of the punishment can increase many times, up to 30,000 euros. At the same time, with the advent of the pandemic, state support for the population was introduced in Spain.
Во время карантина появилась такая выплата под названием ЭРТЕ. Это выплата тем, кто потерял работу именно.
During the quarantine, a payment called ERTE appeared. It is intended for those who lost their jobs because of the quarantine. It is calculated according to your salary and your work experience. At first, it was planned to pay until September 30th, but then they made amendments, and now this ERTE will be paid until the end of January 2021. Also, another aid from the state appeared. It's called Ingreso Minimo Vital. This means that people who live independently can receive different types of assistance at 14 different levels.
Это значит, что люди, которые живут самостоятельно, отдельно, могут получить по 14 разным уровням различные виды помощи. Если вы живете отдельно от родителей, и это доказано в течение нескольких лет, то вы можете претендовать.
If you live separately from your parents, and this has been proven for several years, then you can claim a payment of 460 euros. The amount is not very large because even, say, a room in a multi-room apartment here costs around 250 euros. So this payment allows you to rent very modest housing and eat rather modestly. If you're a family with 2 children, then you're entitled to a payment of 1,015 euros, and it is also not a very large sum. But then again, if you are in dire straits and cannot make any money at all, then of course this is a significant help.
Если у вас бедственное положение и вы вообще никак не можете зарабатывать, то, конечно, это значительная помощь.
Despite the support provided, the business faced unprecedented challenges. The entire tourism sector, which plays one of the main roles in the Spanish economy, sank overnight.
Yo cierro mis empresas el día 14 y tenía que cerrar las empresas, pero no te daban ninguna ayuda. Entonces tú tenías que hacerte cargo, ¿verdad? Que los trabajadores pasan alerta.
We had to close the companies, but we were not giving any help. We still had our obligations. Yes, the employees were sent to ERTE. The state began to pay the employees, but you still had to pay the individual entrepreneur payments. It includes 400 euros, mortgage, and rent. One evening, I saw that next month I need to pay almost 15,000 euros, but my business is not working. And then the next month, again, 15,000 euros, while my business was closed.
Es cuando ya empezaron a meter unas medidas que nos perdonaron la cuota.
We were given 800 euros, but of course 800 euros is not enough because I had to give 15,000 euros and they gave me 800. I wouldn't be able to afford food.
Y sí nos dieron un incentivo, en mi caso fue de 800 euros aproximadamente, normal en el mundo empresarial, y muchas empresas han caído.
As entrepreneurs, we have gone through difficult times and many companies could not survive. In the near future, more companies will go bankrupt. Recovery will take more than 5 years, and this is only if they find the ways to treat the disease and people will be able to travel again. But the economic consequences will still be felt for at least 5 years. You can find more and more often such advertisements about the lease or sale of commercial premises. It's logical small businesses prefer to close, unable to withstand such a long downtime. More announcements are expected next year. Now Spain is officially open to the countries of the European Union and the Schengen area, as well as states with which bilateral agreements on the admission of travelers have been concluded. These are, for example, Australia, Canada, Japan, and others. But still, the influx of the tourists is several times less than before. Indeed, according to the rules of a number of countries, there are restrictions for people arriving from Spain. Not many are ready to be quarantined upon arrival from vacation. Egypt has become another country where tourist sector has been hit hard by the pandemic. The state was closed to tourists for several months. The borders opened only on July 1st, and air traffic with Kazakhstan was restored in mid-September. Now Egypt accepts tourists only if there is a negative PCR test done no earlier than 72 hours before arrival. Our compatriot Nargis Ismailova told us how things are now in popular Egyptian vacation spots. So despite the strict sanitary measures during flight at the resort, tourists are not required to wear masks. The occupancy rate of hotels is no more than 40%, which helps ensure the distance between vacationers. Here, all employees work strictly in masks, just like on excursions. All other precautions are also followed. As we can see, social distance is maintained even on sound loungers near the pool, through 2 sound loungers. They are marked so that we do not use them. The hotels observe absolute cleanliness. Rooms are cleaned twice a day, and towels are brought here in such individual plastic packaging, both for beach and indoor use.
Good morning. Have a good day. Morning.
Egyptian hotel buffets have also been cancelled. The food is protected by a plastic screen. It's no longer possible to take food on your own. Dishes must be ordered from the staff.
Very safe place from COVID-19. We have social distance between every guest. We have a girl who will take a temperature from the door and sanitizer, hand gel sanitizer for everybody. And you have a social distance between every table, and the table works with mask and glove, and the table every table for the guest.
The share of the tourism sector in Egypt's GDP is 15%. Last year, the industry generated a record $13 billion in revenue. The industry has finally recovered from the 2011 revolution. In 2020, the sphere again suffered colossal losses. Egyptian authorities are trying to support the industry and attract new holiday makers. For example, by the end of April next year, the payment of the tourist visa fee was cancelled, making it free. But so far, due to the negative consequences of the pandemic, the Egyptian tourism sector loses about $1.5 billion every month.